Hi Ableton users, I just wanted to do a video demonstrating how I use my GMaudio FMFX Max for Live device. First of all, big thank you to Ableton for sharing my device, and at the moment it is available for free download. So FMFX allows you to apply FM synthesis to any signal. So similar to how you would use a modulator in Operator, you can choose the pitch of the oscillator that you're using to modulate the signal and control the amount of modulation, which is basically just controlling the volume of the oscillator, which is modulating your signal. So let's have a listen to how that sounds. So here I've just got the analog instrument and I've just got it set to sine wave at the moment. And if I play a note, it's definitely a sine wave. Now, if I turn on my FMFX device, that is modulating the frequency of the output of the analog instrument at audio rate, creating new harmonics. You can see the difference here if I play that again, and then applying FM synthesis using my FMFX device. You can see the extra harmonics that are being generated. So there's a bunch of different ways that you can use this, and I'll demonstrate a few of those in a few different contexts with some of these sounds here. But first off, I'll just show you around the device. So you have the different oscillators that you can choose to use as a modulator for your signal. There's sine, triangle, square, and saw. Crank up the amount so you can hear the difference a bit more. So they all provide a slightly different tonality and a different set of harmonics. Now this ratio knob here is basically the multiplication of your frequency setting. So at the moment this is set to the note A, but I can set this to any note I choose. And then I can multiply the frequency of this note using the ratio knob. So the default is 1, so it's not applying any multiplication to the frequency that you select. So you can choose the frequency via note or manually via frequency. And you can also choose the frequency by using the accompanying Max for Live device, which sends the MIDI information to this device and uses that to select the frequency. So to do that, simply add the FMFX MIDI O device before your instrument, and this will send the MIDI information to this device, and we'll use that to control the frequency of the modulator. So you can see now that the notes that I enter are read out here and are being sent to this device just by clicking the word MIDI. And now the ratio is the multiplication of this. So what can be really cool is just slightly detuning it by increasing or decreasing the ratio by a small amount. And if I pitch this down, so with that little bit of detune, it sounds really cool. So that's all the parameters. Now I'll show you a few different ways that I like to use this device. So the first way that I like to use it is to make big growling respaces that you'll hear in dubstep and drum and bass. So I like to use a sine wave with the volume turned up and a higher drive setting in the filter section. And I've just set this to mono as well, and turned on glide and legato in the filter and amplitude sections as well. So now I have this gliding sine wave lead. If I just play something here. And then what I like to do is create an audio effect rack where I have a dry chain. So this is pretty much just that sine wave used as like a sub oscillator. So that's going through with almost no processing, just a little bit of EQ. But then I have another chain which creates all the extra harmonics and movement. So this is a nice way to get a really good clean sub bass with a little bit extra harmonics, and then heaps of control over your top layer. So in this top layer, I've got an erosion, my FMFX device. I'll just turn these others off for now. So here is a little MIDI clip I've prepared. And I've just drawn in some automation for the amount on my FMFX device. So this pattern's only 2 bars, and this envelope is unlinked and goes on for 4 bars. So the frequency is being chosen by the MIDI send device so that it's reacting to the MIDI information that I'm sending the instrument and keeps everything in tune. And that automation just creates a nice rhythm. Having the erosion beforehand creates some stereo information for FMFX to modulate. If I turn that off, still sounds good, but so now with the other devices that I've got here, so this one is just a sweeping notch filter that has some stereo separation, some chorus, and then my GMaudio Wavefolder device. So this is further distorting the signal. And by modulating that symmetry, I'm doing a kind of pseudo pulse width modulation. So with a sine wave, you don't have pulse width modulation, but by clipping the signal using this wavefolder and modulating the symmetry, we're kind of creating this pulse width modulation type movement or distortion of the signal. So then I've just got some EQ here, and now that's that chain. So that's the top end of my bass, and then the low end, and then together. And then I've just got some other racks that I've made here. So this one is a little bandpass filter sweep. And this one here is a filter to further control the harmonics that are being generated by the devices that I've applied. And also just a macro to create a bit of a rhythm with that filter. Then I've got some reverb, my GMaudio Mono Maker device, which just monos the low end below 150 Hertz. Some more EQ. And a saturator at the end to glue it all together. And now with my drums. So that's one way of using it to create some big, fat, dirty basses, and hopefully that gives you some ideas of how you can use it to create your own bass lines. But this combination of a clean, distorted sine wave and then another chain doing all the modulation and distortion can sound really cool to create big, fat bass lines. So now another example I want to show you is using it to create a kind of complex oscillator that you would typically get in, say, some type of Eurorack module. So there's a little trick here. By using vinyl distortion, it creates a very small signal. So I've just got some pops and clicks coming through. And that is enough to get a filter to feed back. So I'll just turn off these devices for a second so you can hear what I started with. So here's just a filter, and I'm going to turn the resonance all the way up, and that's basically going to produce a sine wave at the frequency of the cutoff. So I'll turn this up. Now this feeding back, or self-oscillation of the filter, only happens when you're on one of the analog modes. So now I'll turn on all these and you can hear what each device is doing. So I'll just turn this on and turn off some of this. Cool. So there's FMFX, just adding some frequency modulation to that, creating some more harmonics. And I could tune this any way I wanted to. And I can also freely change the frequency of this kind of oscillator that I've created by using this resonant filter. But I'm just going to stick with that. And here I've got my Wavefolder device. And again, I'm using modulation on the symmetry and also on the folds. So folds is the amount of folding back or distortion that is applied to the signal using this device. And then some more effects, such as a grain delay, an auto pan to create some rhythm, and just some EQ and saturation. So that's really cool for kind of industrial experimental genres, or perhaps you could use it to create some sort of pitch riser. But the idea is you're basically creating a sine wave using a filter and then generating more harmonics with the FMFX device and my Wavefolder device. So that's another trick. Now, the FMFX device doesn't just have to be applied to synth sounds. You could also apply it to drum loops. So that's one of the benefits of having it as a device. So here I have a drum loop. And that's just going to this group, and I'll turn this FMFX device off. So that's the loop. And if I turn on FMFX, Now, what I'm doing differently here is using another Max for Live device, the envelope follower, to modulate the amount of frequency modulation that occurs. So that just creates a kind of cool rhythm and a bit of movement to that frequency modulation. If I turn this off, it doesn't sound quite as cool. So if I turn that back on, so it's a little bit more interesting than just this drum loop here. And again, you can tune the pitch however you like. And try it on some different drums. And let's have a listen to that with some drums. That's a bit too fast. That's better. Or another example. Here I've got an 808 playing a bit of a tom loop. And then that is going to this group. So if I turn on the FMFX device, but then I can use the envelope following on this track to control the amount of frequency modulation being applied to this sound. So that's adding a lot of modulation and tonality to quite a simple kind of tom loop. So before, and then after. So that's another example. And then this last one here is more so to demonstrate my GMaudio Wavefolder device. So here I just have a sine wave. If I just play this. So just a sine wave in operator. But I can use my GMaudio Wavefolder device to add some more harmonics. Let's have a listen to how that sounds. So there I'm modulating the symmetry again to give that kind of pseudo pulse width modulation, and also modulating the fold, so that's the amount of distortion that occurs. And then I'm also going to modulate the sustain level of this sine wave oscillator. So now let's play a little bit more interesting MIDI pattern. So this is a good way to get those modular synth type sounds by just feeding it a simple sine wave and then adding harmonics using this distortion. And the different settings for this device will create different tonalities and different amounts of harmonics. So here I've got it on clip, which will just clip the signal, turning this sine wave basically into a square wave. Then there's fold, which is turning it a little bit more into a saw wave. And then wrap creates the most harmonics, and it's a bit of a mix between square, triangle, and saw. So I've just got some more effects here at the end. So because we're adding harmonics by distorting the sound using this Wavefolder device, I'm just taking some away with this filter, and I've set the LFO to 16th so I get a bit of a rhythmic movement happening on the filter. And then again, I'm using my Monomaker device, an echo, and just some compression to keep it all in check. So we started with just a sine wave. And then finish with this really cool moving kind of almost acid type lead. And then let's add some drums. So that's an example of using the Wavefolder device to create more harmonics. And when you couple both the FMFX and Wavefolder device together, you can really generate some interesting textures and sounds from something quite simple. And with the power of audio effect racks in Ableton Live, you can create all sorts of sounds. So thanks for watching this video. Both my FMFX device and Wavefolder device are currently free for a limited time. Again, big thanks to Ableton for sharing my devices, and I'm really looking forward to see how others use these devices. Also, if you've got any feature requests for these devices or any of my other devices, feel free to comment on this video. I'll also post the discount links to these devices and all my others, and the link to Ableton sharing this device. I hope this video hasn't been too complicated for some of you and gives you a good idea of how you can use these devices. Please check out my other videos and hit subscribe. So grab these devices while they're free and enjoy. Thanks for watching.